alpha husband found out that I made fun of him behind his back and did this next. Hello, Reddit. My name is Joanne, and I am 26 years old. My boyfriend has completely ruined my life, and it's totally my fault because I know I provoked him, and he reacted based on how hurt he felt. Now I'm just so confused and unhappy, and I don't know what to do. My boyfriend is actually my boss, and he has now fired me very publicly and embarrassingly because he overheard me telling my friends he has a little one with a hidden recorder, and then he took revenge. Now I'm jobless, penniless, homeless, and also heartbroken. I'm literally a whole lot of things at this moment, and it doesn't help matters knowing that everything is my fault and that I'm only facing the consequences of my silly actions. Even as a child, I have always wanted to be a people pleaser, and I always did everything in my power to do exactly that. Even if it meant doing something bad, I always wanted to get approval from everyone around me, and I didn't even realize it until now that Jamie has decided to end things with me. I was born into a family of 8, and I was the last child. My parents were very difficult to please, especially when you have 7 perfect siblings, and you seem to be the only one who is dull, not entirely dull, but not as bright as your older ones. I've always tried to live up to my siblings' legacy, and even now, I guess that affected my mentality on how I viewed things. Thinking back, I realized that my parents were never hard on me and just gave me a free pass that they didn't have with my older siblings. But because I was too caught up in trying to be as perfect as they were, I automatically believed that that was their standard for me. When I got into high school, I became a copycat. I mean, any person I saw and wanted to be like, I would start to dress exactly like them, learn their style of talking and walking, and literally copy everything about them. No. The first time I did that was with my immediate older sister, Annie. Annie was a straight A student, and she was admired by everyone because of how cool she was. I wanted that for myself. I wanted to be loved and admired by people. So I started to behave exactly as she would. I even started studying really hard so I could get perfect grades as she did, but that proved difficult and I eventually stopped. The next person I tried to copy was my friend June. June noticed me trying to copy everything she did, and she freaked out and called me a pervert. Since then, I have tried to tone down my copycat nature. When I went to college, I made new friends who were considered the big girls, and I started living a lie trying to keep up with them. Coral and Ginny were the only 2 friends I made in college. They each had very rich parents, so they were very spoiled, and they spent money as they liked. I lied to them, telling them I had very rich parents and that both my parents didn't live in the country, and I saw them only once in a while. Somehow, they believed my made-up story and hung out with me all the time. My first boyfriend was Sam. Sam had been my high school friend, and I had a massive crush on him back in high school, but he had been dating June, the girl who called me a pervert. But we coincidentally met again in the same college, and we started talking. Sam was a very kind and gentle person, and I liked him really well. So when he asked me to be his girlfriend, I said yes without hesitation, and we started dating. Our relationship was very good, and I began to relax because, with Sam, I didn't have to pretend to be someone I wasn't. I started spending less time with Coral and Ginny, and when they eventually noticed, they asked for an introduction to my boyfriend. I panicked because I knew that one word from Sam could put me out of the social circle I was in. I also knew that Sam didn't approve of the friends I kept, so he would probably be pleased if I wasn't friends with them anymore. So I ensured that their paths never crossed, and I spent so much time doing that Sam started noticing what I was doing. He began to complain about me trying to hide our relationship because he thought I was ashamed of him. I tried several times to get him to understand what was at stake. If Coral and Ginny actually found out I lied about my family, they would never talk to me again, and they would probably spread the news, therefore ruining my reputation. I didn't want that, so I ended things with Sam to protect my secret. Sam was devastated when I broke things off with him and tried really hard to get us back together. But even though I was in love with him, my lie seemed more expensive than the relationship, and I just couldn't do it. In my final year, I met Harrison at one of the parties I had been invited to by Ginny and Coral. He came over to where I sat with my friends and asked if we could chat. My friends actually sneered, probably because it wasn't one of them he wanted to talk to, and that made me happy. Harrison was a very handsome man, and he had this accent that somehow made his way of speaking very sexy. We got to talking and even exchanged contact information, and I was giddy with excitement, not only because he called me out among my friends, but because Harrison was quite popular in school, and rich too. And I knew that if I started hanging out with him, I would become even more popular than my friends. I've always known that the friendship Coral, Ginny, and I shared had more fake elements than real, and there was always competition going on between us, especially Coral and Ginny, because I obviously wasn't even up to their standard, no matter how much I pretended. I started dating Harrison within a week of talking and texting. Harrison spoiled me silly with gifts and money. I was over the moon because I started spending as much as my friends did whenever we went out, and that pleased me deeply. Ginny and Coral, of course, got jealous because of the attention I was receiving. They lied to me, saying that Harrison was sleeping around, and that he would probably get me infected with a sexually transmitted disease. I believed them because I wanted our friendship, but at the same time I didn't want to let go of Harrison because of how much he spent. So I lied to my friends, telling them I had broken up with Harrison, while secretly continuing to see him. When we graduated, Harrison traveled out of the country to study more, and eventually we lost contact. And that was how things ended between Harrison and me. After graduation, I couldn't get a job quickly enough, and I didn't have any means of getting one because everyone was demanding some sort of skills before I could get hired. A year passed, and I still couldn't get a job, and I was already almost penniless. So I decided to go back to my hometown and stay with my parents for a while, and I went home. My parents were very happy to see me, especially because I never came home once after I left for college. My siblings were all not around as they lived in different states with their spouses. I stayed home for a month, and I was getting frustrated staying there because my parents started giving me money again since I had none, as I still hadn't gotten a job. Compared to what I used to get while in school when I was dating Harrison, I was frustrated because it was just too little for me. But one day, luck smiled on me, and that was when I met Victor. Victor was actually my high school classmate, and we had been slightly close back then. He came home to visit his mother and sister, and we reconnected, and I complained to him about my jobless status. He asked if I would like to work at his company because they were hiring, and he could put in a word for me. I was excited and happy because that meant I finally had a job after almost 2 years of looking for one. All this while, I had lied to Ginny and Coral, saying I had traveled out of the country, and I barely spoke with them so they wouldn't see through my lie. True to his word, Victor got me a job interview at the company he worked for, and I went there for the interview. But because I had no place to stay, I stayed with Victor for a while. You see, Victor lived with his girlfriend, and when she was told by him that I was staying with them for a while, she got angry and refused. But Victor was adamant about his decision, and his girlfriend broke up with him. Soon enough, I was hired, and Victor and I started working at the same company. We were good working partners, and everything went fine between us. I paid him rent for my space. He didn't want me to, but I insisted. One weekend, Victor and I decided to drink and watch a movie together. We purchased lots of alcohol, and by the end of the movie, we were very tipsy. That night, Victor and I ended up having sex on the couch. We apologized to each other the next morning and both decided that it couldn't happen again. But then it did, over and over again. We were just having casual sex, but we both agreed we were free to see other people. However, I noticed that whenever I got interested in a new guy, Victor usually got upset and jealous. But I didn't think much of it and tagged it as normal. Maybe because Victor wasn't seeing anyone besides me, even though we both agreed we were free to. This went on for about a year, until one time when our CEO decided to visit our branch. Since I had only been there for a year, I had never met him because he mainly stayed at the headquarters. Everyone was nervous, and the bosses snapped at anyone who didn't do anything right. We were all anxious because we didn't know what to expect, especially the new workers among us, including me. The day he was supposed to arrive, I was asked to place some documents on the desk in the office organizer for his arrival. Normally, I was supposed to just drop the documents and leave before he arrived. But as I was dropping them on his desk, I heard the door open, and someone came in. I mean, 2 people came in, but I knew automatically who the boss was. Since everyone had been banned from this floor, I knew it had to be the one person we were expecting to arrive. I had never been so scared in my life, and I must have looked like a person caught doing something bad because he looked at me suspiciously. He asked me what I was doing there, and I stammered and shook as I told him my name, the position I held, and what I had been doing. He paused, looked at me for a few seconds, then walked to his desk, sat in the chair in front of it, picked up one of the documents, and started flipping through it. I just stood there watching, expecting an instruction, because it was like my brain was fried and I couldn't think, afraid he'd hear my thoughts. Yeah, did I mention that I do that a lot? I mean, I stop thinking at moments when I'm caught unaware, shocked, or disappointed, because I tend to say exactly what I'm thinking at that moment. And most times, that has gotten me in trouble as a kid.
No.
He looked up from the document he was flipping through, smiled at me, and told me I could relax and that I could leave if I wanted to. The smile caught me unaware because it transformed his whole stoic face into one of warmth and kindness, and his dimples were on display too. I must have stayed glued to that spot until the other man in the room cleared his throat. Startled, I then ran out of the room like a rabbit caught in the headlights of a car. I couldn't stop thinking about him all day, and that somehow affected my effectiveness. I was scolded twice because of how distracted I was, and I made some silly mistakes. I told Victor about my experience with the boss when we got home from work, and he laughed, then warned me to stay away from him because he could, within a twinkle of an eye, make me unemployed again. I knew it was true, but that still didn't stop my wandering mind. I tried hard to stop my growing affection for a man I had just met once, but it was nearly impossible. The third day after the arrival of the big boss, I was summoned to the last floor by him, and everyone was scared for me. I myself didn't feel too good, and thought about the silly mistake of just being there when the boss arrived and even stammering when I was asked a question. Different things raced through my mind, and I was very anxious when I went up to his office. When I got there, he was typing away on his laptop, and didn't even notice my presence until I announced myself. He stopped typing, closed his laptop, and asked me to sit down in the seat in front of him. I sat there anxiously. He started asking me questions about when I started working there, my education qualifications, and other things like that. I answered everything truthfully, still very anxious. Then he asked if I lived alone or stayed with my family. Though the question surprised me, I answered because he was obviously the boss, but I lied and said I lived with one of my older sisters. It wasn't exactly my fault for lying. I couldn't just tell him Victor and I lived together, so I had to lie. He introduced himself as George and asked me to call him George instead of addressing him as Sir, and I nervously agreed, wondering what was going on. Then he invited me to have dinner with him the next day. I was shocked, but I agreed to the dinner date because inside I was squirming with happiness. When I went back down, I schooled my face to show nothing of the conversation I had with the boss. When they came to ask me what the matter was, I just told them that he asked me some questions about work, and I casually dismissed it as nothing. I even refused to tell Victor anything about the encounter, other than what I told everyone else. The next day, I lied to Victor, telling him I was invited to a party at a friend's place so that he wouldn't ask where I was going. That evening was one of my best nights. I had so much fun, especially because I was treated like royalty at the restaurant, obviously because of my wealthy date. We were served a variety of dishes, and I made sure to take a bite of everything. At the end of the night, I was so full that I couldn't even eat dessert. Conversations with George just flowed easily. He was an easy person to talk to, and he told me about the places he had been to and about his life as a CEO. Apparently, though his parents were very rich and owned a law firm, he didn't want anything to do with law because he had never been interested in it. So he studied business against his parents' wishes and started up his own company from scratch. At the end of the night, I don't know how it was possible, but I had fallen in love with George. I mean, he was so admirable and inspiring, and I envied him so much. Despite all his wealth, he had no pride and was really humble, even in his speech. I've never fallen for a guy faster than how I fell for George. After that night, we had many more dates, and each one was somehow better than the last and more enjoyable. Within 3 weeks of knowing each other, George asked me to be his girlfriend, and I excitedly agreed. But then I had one problem, and that was Victor. I didn't know how to tell him without upsetting him, so I decided to keep it to myself for a while since the relationship was new, and anything could happen. I even stopped sleeping with Victor, and whenever he tried to initiate sex, I would come up with different excuses. Victor couldn't complain since we weren't exactly in a relationship. Another problem was that George didn't intend to hide our relationship and was always requesting me to come up to his office. At first, people suspected me of being the office gossip, but eventually, I think they began to suspect it was something else. Especially one day when George texted me to come up because he missed me and I refused. Then he threatened to come down and summon me himself, knowing I wouldn't be able to say no in person, especially in front of everyone. I thought he was bluffing, and I just ignored the text after reading it, but George actually came down and asked me to see him. Everyone started to suspect me, especially Victor. At home, he would always ask if something was going on between George and me, especially the one time we were talking about work, and I mistakenly slipped up and said George instead of the big boss, as we usually called him. Victor asked when I started addressing our boss on a first-name basis, and I lied, saying I didn't do so at the office, that I was just tired of calling him Big Boss all the time when his name was actually George. Victor didn't believe me, but I didn't care. Lying all the time about my relationship with George was getting exhausting, and I wanted to get away from him, so I started planning to get a new place. But my dream apartment was way above my budget, and when I mentioned something about getting an apartment, Victor asked why I wanted a new place. I lied to him, saying I wasn't comfortable staying with my older sister because she nagged a lot, but my dream apartment was way more than my budget. George got me the apartment. I told Victor I was moving out, and he was surprised and asked why. I told him I just wanted my personal space, and that we couldn't live together forever anyway. Victor, knowing my mind was made up, said nothing and wished me luck. After I moved, I decided to invite my friends Ginny and Coral over, lying again that I was now back in the country and wanted to host them. They came and were surprised to see my apartment, and it pleased me, especially when we all went shopping, and I was again able to shop as much as they did. I bragged about my new relationship to them and told them how much George spoiled me with gifts. I even lied that he had come to the town because he followed me back there, and they fell for my lie hook, line, and sinker. I even bragged that I worked at his company because he begged me to, so I could always be within his sight. They were clearly impressed with me, and that pleased me more than I can say. I started to demand much more from George so I could obviously impress my friends. I demanded that he promote me and give me a huge salary. I also asked for money to buy lots of clothes, most of which I couldn't even wear because they were too much. George did everything I asked just to satisfy me and make me happy. When I got promoted suddenly at work, everyone's suspicions were confirmed, but I didn't care anymore, and I knew they couldn't accuse me of anything because I was their boss and could get them fired anytime I chose to. But I had one problem with George, despite the fact that he was everything I've wanted in a man. Well, except that one thing. George had a small male genital. I don't exactly mean it was very small, but I was never satisfied whenever we had sex. Somehow, that usually reminded me of how good Victor was, and it frustrated me sometimes. George knew how to initiate foreplay so well that I got very aroused, but when we eventually had sex, it was always disappointing. George seemed to think he was okay in bed, and usually even boasted about it whenever he tried teasing me, which annoyed me. This continued for 3 whole months, and by the end of the 3 months, I was so sexually frustrated I resorted to sorting myself out. Then I heard about Victor's engagement to another lady. Victor was getting married in a month, and he had shared his invitation card with everyone in the office except me. When I heard about it, I was surprised because I knew that Victor had feelings for me, even though we were only having casual sex. The fact that he moved on so quickly from me made me upset. The lady he was marrying was his ex-girlfriend, who had left when he allowed me to stay over at his place. Apparently, they reconnected, got back together, and decided to make things official by getting married. I decided to go see him and find out whether he had truly moved on from me, or was just putting up a facade to get my attention. I went over to Victor's place, and luckily and unluckily, his fiancée wasn't around as I saw her drive out. She obviously didn't see me because I was in my own car, which George had bought for me, and the windows were tinted. Victor was on the couch watching a match, as he usually did on weekends while we were still living together. When he saw me, he was surprised and asked what I wanted. Earlier that morning, before George traveled for an important business trip, he had woken me up wanting to have sex. As he initiated foreplay, as usual, his phone rang. It was his personal assistant calling to say he was in front of the house, ready to leave for the airport. So George had left me hanging and sexually frustrated. So, seeing Victor in just his shorts and no top at all instantly aroused me, and I just sat on Victor's lap without saying anything and started kissing him. Victor tried to remove my tangled limbs from his shoulder, but I wouldn't let go and started kissing him down his throat, which I knew usually turned him on. Within seconds, Victor was turned on, and we ended up having sex that day, right there on his couch again. Afterward, Victor felt regretful and asked me to leave his house. I made no objections because I was very sexually satisfied and happy, forgetting the damning consequences. After that day, I was still able to entice Victor into sleeping with me again. I invited him over to my place, telling him I wanted to apologize for seducing him, but he never knew I had the intention to seduce him again. He came over, and I wore my sexiest lingerie and cooked him a meal, which I insisted he eat before leaving. He obliged. After the meal, I begged him to stay a little while longer since we were friends, and friends could actually have conversations. When he rejected the offer, I guilt-tripped him by saying that it meant he wasn't ready to forgive me. He eventually agreed to stay for just 1 more hour. Of course, I seduced him again, and we had sex that night. When he tried to get angry, I told him it was just like before when we were having casual sex and allowed ourselves to see other people, so there was nothing more to it. After that, we continued having sex, and because of that, I gradually stopped having sex with George, since he hadn't been satisfying me. Before long, I stopped altogether. George, of course, tried everything he could to get me interested in having sex with him again, but I would come up with different excuses. The crazy thing is, I love George very much, and he really was everything I've always wanted in a man. I didn't even feel half the way I felt about George with Victor. To me, Victor was just helping me with sexual satisfaction, nothing else. But at that point, I felt like I couldn't give up either of them because of what I got from each of them. I continued having sex with Victor, and I stayed with George because I loved him and also because my finances were sorted out. The day George started suspecting me was when I was supposed to meet up with Victor at his apartment. As I was leaving to do so, George suddenly showed up, saying he wanted to surprise me and take me out on a lunch date. When he asked where I was going, I lied that I was just going to go shopping because I was bored, but that a lunch date sounded better. So we went out to the restaurant that George frequented, and of course we were served a variety of dishes to choose from. I was enjoying myself so much that I forgot to text Victor about the change in plans. When I excused myself to go to the restroom, I left my phone and took my purse, thinking my phone was in my purse. Victor texted, asking why I wasn't at his place yet, and George read the text before I got back from the restroom. When I saw my phone in his hand, I panicked, but tried not to show it. He asked who Victor was and why I was supposed to have an appointment with him. I lied that Victor was my jeweler, and I had plans to meet up with him that day, but I had forgotten about it, and he was just texting to ask why I hadn't shown up. George didn't totally believe me, but he didn't say anything at that point, and we continued our lunch. Another time he almost caught us was when Victor decided to spend the night at my apartment, and I agreed because I knew George had gone on a business trip again and wasn't due back until the next day. But I was shocked to see George return that night, and he decided to spend the night at my place instead of going to his. I asked Victor to hide in my closet. When George saw his shoes outside my house, he asked why there were male shoes outside my apartment. I lied, saying that the man who came to fix the AC had removed them when he came in, wore a pair of slippers, and must have forgotten his shoes because he left in a hurry. I know, the lie sounded unbelievable to my ears too, but George didn't ask any further questions. Then he received a business call, and he had to leave, which allowed Victor to leave and go back to his home that day. I guess the final straw was when he actually attached a recorder to the inside of my bag when I went over to his place to sleep over. I hadn't even known because the bag was my favorite, and I took it out more than the others. I decided to go over to Ginny and Coral's place because we had planned a girls' time, and I went directly from George's place since some of my clothes were there. When we met up, we started talking about our individual relationships, and when it was my turn to say something, I started mocking George about his small genitals and how short he lasted. I was only telling them that so they would think George was the one clinging to me and that I was the dominant one in the relationship. I didn't actually know that George had been listening in on me telling my friends about my affair because I just couldn't cope with his low sexual prowess. When I left my friend's place after spending more than half the day there, I had gone back to my apartment, but surprisingly, my apartment had been locked up with another lock. I was pissed and decided to spend the night at George's place. But when I got there, George just looked at me and pressed a button on the remote in his hand. The screen opened to reveal my house and every inch of it. He then pressed another button, and the video of me having sex with Victor was on display. I was so shocked. I hadn't even noticed there were CCTV cameras inside my house. But George was obviously not finished. He pressed a tiny remote in his other hand, and my voice came on, mocking him about his size to Ginny and Coral. I was stunned and didn't know what to say. George told me he was the one who locked up my apartment, and he wanted me gone from his house and anywhere around him. In fact, he even fired me from work very publicly when I tried going in, thinking he hadn't said anything about that. He also fired Victor, and his fiancée found out about the two of us. Now he's jobless, has no fiancé for the wedding, and blames me for everything. Now I don't know what to do. I really do still love George, and I regret what I did. I really want our relationship back. Please, guys, if you have any advice that could help me out of this situation, I will be forever grateful. Please. Update. Hello, Reddit, it's me again. Words cannot fully express how I feel at the moment. I feel so disheartened by everything that has been happening to me. When I came to this app, hoping I might get one useful tip on how to win George over again, yes, I expected the insults. But I didn't expect that not one person would see how regretful I am and actually advise me on a positive step to take next. Thinking back on everything, while sitting once more in the room I was given by my parents back in our hometown, as I had nowhere else to go, I realized how stupid I was and how I ruined everything for myself. George had been the very best man for me, and I ruined everything between us. Now I'm stuck here with so many regrets. I just cannot forgive myself for what I did, and it honestly hurts so badly. Funnily enough, my parents ask me why I'm sad and why they hear my cries every night, and I can't even tell them, because that's how shameful everything I did was. I know that my parents frown upon cheating so much, and I can't bear for them to look at me the way George had. It would be the final straw. So I'm just alone with my emotions, having no one to tell my story to, because I know I'm the cause of everything that has happened. I feel so disgusted with myself. I just wanted to belong, to become someone I wasn't, to be able to compete successfully with my so-called friends. I lied throughout my relationship, and now I've lost everything, 100%. Now they don't even think I exist because they've ignored every one of my calls after hearing what happened. Now I wish I hadn't been so desperate and stupid as to lose the man I love. George wouldn't even hear me out. He blocked me on every possible means of contact, and I know I deserve it, very much so, but it doesn't stop the pain from being this unbearable. I know you all think I deserve everything that's coming to me, and I believe it too. Victor doesn't even want to see me, and I've been avoiding going anywhere near his parents' part of town because he might have told them, and if they saw me and said anything, the news would spread widely. My parents would also hear, which means I wouldn't even be able to hide my shame anymore. I desperately wish I had predicted this end and actually done things differently so I wouldn't have ended up with literally nothing. No money, no achievements, no friends, and the worst part of all is that there's no more George in my life. Update. Hello Reddit, this is my last post here, and I just wanted to say that I'm grateful I was able to tell my story and maybe help some greedy girls like I was so they never make the same mistakes I did because of the damning consequences. I regret everything I've done to hurt George, and I know I will forever pay for my sins because I'll never find anyone like George again. This emptiness I feel, this emptiness inside me hurts. It hurts badly, and I wouldn't wish the same for anyone else. Thanks and goodbye.
I left my husband in the middle of the night because I was tired of his non-existent big dreams and goals. But now karma has gotten me hard, and he has made it big in life. He has had a huge glow-up, and now he wants to divorce me and ruin my life after I threw divorce papers at him. I don't think it's wrong for me to have wanted to share in this new success of his, but 2 years is a long time for two people to grow apart. Help me here, guys. This is complicated, but I still need help regardless, and I'm sure I'll be able to get some help here. My husband has become very successful, and he's rubbing it all in my face. He even has a girlfriend now, and it doesn't sit right with me that this new woman is the one that's going to be enjoying all of his wealth. Yes, I want him back. Am I wrong for getting tired of supporting my husband's big dreams and leaving him because I didn't want to keep funding his business ideas? I don't think so, but my husband feels otherwise. My name is Brenda, and I'm a 26-year-old businesswoman. I sell female clothes, and I own a store for it. I've been married for 5 years, but we have been separated for 2 years in total. The name of my husband is Gregory, and he's 30 years old. Things were not always bad from the start of our marriage. We were both working at first, and things were going well till he lost his job a few days before our wedding. His company decided to let off some workers, and unfortunately, he was one of them. Of course, he told me about it before we got married, and I told him I didn't mind. Of course, I said that because I thought we had a bright future together. Before he lost his job, he earned a lot of money, and I was so sure that I was getting married to a very rich man. I had no idea that things would end up going bad, and I would regret my decision at the end of the day. After the wedding, it was still all blossom and bliss because we still had some part of the money he saved before he was sacked. Things didn't just go bad straight away. It was more like a gradual process, a very painful gradual process to be precise. At first, when he didn't find a job, I wasn't bothered at all because I honestly believed he would get a job one way or another. But Gregory didn't find a job, if rather he didn't search for a job. I don't know how to explain this, but I'll just say it as it is. I think he got PTSD from getting let off at work, and so he just started to dispose of the thought of working for someone and being under their mercy. I was patient for the first 6 months, but when I realized that he made no plans to get things right, I decided to take matters into my own hands and start asking him the right questions. I found myself asking my own husband why he was still unemployed and didn't look for a job. Each time I brought up the topic, he would explain to me that he was setting up his own business idea and didn't want to be that kind of situation where he was going to get fired for a job all over again. Did I get where he was coming from? Yes, to an extent I could understand why he would want to build up a business from scratch by himself. Was I ready to be patient with him? No, I was not. I was just 21 when I got married. No part of me prepared to be broke in just the first 6 months of getting married to a guy that I believed was loaded enough to take care of me. I couldn't believe that I was already having money talks with my husband in just the first 6 months of our marriage. It wasn't the kind of life I had envisioned for myself, so it was hard to accept the reality he had been trying to enforce on me. At that point, there wasn't really anything lacking in the house, and there was more than enough food that would take us a long time. He wasn't absolutely broke by then either, and we could still afford to go to one of 2 dates, but things weren't as smooth as I initially thought they would be. But I decided to be patient for some time and just see where things would go. Gradually, I began to realize just how much of a mistake I made. I'm in the first year of our marriage. Things were still the same, and he just kept going on meetings with his friends, staring at his computer all day and telling me the big business goals he had. I could not believe that a girl like me was in that situation, and to be honest, I was very angry. I only remembered marrying a man who worked and actually earned, so it was just too abnormal to see him at home while I went to work. He never asked me to bring in money to keep up with expenses. That was never a problem, but I had a problem with the fact that he didn't give me money for shopping or personal upkeep. I couldn't buy new clothes or go out as often as I wanted. He would just let me use my own money to take care of myself. I wasn't even saving money at all. Things were that difficult, and it was just the first year. Gregory would only encourage me with words like he was putting things in place and he had a plan. Those were just the words I heard almost every single day, and I got tired of them. Anyone in my position would get tired of it too. I remember getting married, not getting into problems, so I had to mentally tell myself to be patient. So after the first year of our marriage, I actually thought things were turning around for the better because of how serious Gregory became. He spoke to some of his friends, and they had conversations about taking up plans to start something up. I never really cared to listen long enough to know what they were planning for. I just always wanted to make sure that they were working for the betterment of our life. I still kept my job and made money, but I didn't like spending it on myself. I mean, I'm a businesswoman, but I never imagined funding my own business when I had a husband to do that for me. Eventually, I got tired of waiting all over again and called Gregory on our second marriage anniversary to ask him why things were still going slow. Gregory got very angry and accused me of not being patient enough. That's another red flag that I noticed from him. I just couldn't understand why my own husband was angry because I was asking him about his finances. Gregory always has this alpha male energy, and that's one of the reasons his ego never allowed him to apply for jobs. He wanted to do it on his own. Whenever I asked him why he was turning down so many opportunities, he said he didn't want to get surprised by another company just like his former company had surprised him. Again, he still had money that we used to run the house, but I was still worried that I wasn't learning the life I had envisioned. Instead of talking about vacations, trips, and upgrading our house, we were talking about business goals when we didn't even have a business yet. Apart from that, I was also low-key scared because I knew that at some point, he would end up asking me for money, and I just didn't want that at all. The thought of him asking me for money or help didn't sit well with me, so I got eager for him to get a job. 2 years of marriage with so much trouble at that time was just so suffocating to me. He had goals he spoke about, but I got tired of hearing about goals and just wanted to see the results. You all should just try seeing things from my own perspective. I didn't sign up for that kind of life, so why should I even try living it? My patience was very slim, and it started to show because I stopped hiding it completely. Gregory and I got into an argument almost every single day. It was just the same routine of him coming into the bedroom after locking himself in the study room with some files and his computer, and then I'll start to ask him when the results of his laziness would yield results. He had the same answer of telling me I had no reason to worry because he still had money on him, but I called it nonsense. I didn't want to just survive. I wanted to love life, and I needed a husband that would give me that. Another thing that always hurt me was the fact that he was never really ready to listen to me when I spoke about everything. He'd just watch me and say nothing about it. When I said nothing, he didn't try to apologize for putting me through all the worry and stress. Yes, I always saw him doing things and working at the study, but I needed to see the results. Big instead of seeing the results, he'd just tell me his business goals, and to be honest, I never cared. So I started staying late at my shop. Of course, I got tired of the routine and needed a break. It just always made me angry to come back home and see my husband in the same place I left him. Is that the normal way to leave? To come home and see your husband staring at a computer with a pen in his hand which he uses to write down stuff? Is that work? Just drafting out goals without showing results? I mean, it had been over 2 years by then and I was over it. I was tired of waiting for him. I was upset and I was drained, but physically and mentally. I couldn't even stand the sight of his files and business plans whenever he tried to show them to me. He always tried to carry me along with his progress at home, so the only way to escape was to stay late at my shop and wait for him to sleep off. I didn't cheat on him while we were together. Let me make that clear. I didn't even cheat while I stayed late at the shop. I had that much respect for him in our marriage, but it was not enough for the both of us. I actually filed for divorce and got the papers ready because I thought it would make him wake up. Fast forward to one day when he refused to sleep before I came, and then he asked me why I came home late. I tried lying at first, but he was angry and persistent, so I just told him that I was tired of him being jobless. Guys, that day it was almost like I unleashed a beast in Gregory. He got so angry that he almost broke the TV. His veins were on his face, it was that bad. I didn't get why he was the one getting worked up when I should have been the one going through the stress. But at the end of the day, I had no choice than to tell him he was overreacting. Yeah. He got angry and accused me of not supporting him when he needed me the most. Yes, he really said that. I mean, why should I support someone that was wasting my time? I was young in my early 20s and had just gotten into marriage. I didn't plan to be anyone's support system. Even if I wanted to be a support system, I need at least see the effort on your end, but from my point of view, Gregory just wanted to waste my time. So that night, he gave me an ultimatum and told me that if I wanted to keep staying out late, then I was looking for trouble in our marriage. I took the papers out of my drawer and threw it at him. He sauced on the floor and barged out of the room without any reaction. He didn't sleep in the bedroom that night, and he didn't sleep in the house. That was what gave me enough time to make my decision. I came to the conclusion that I wanted to leave the narrative for maybe 2 months just to see if he would cave in and go look for a job. I packed my things and left the house before dawn the next day. Barely 3 hours after I left, I got a lot of mixed calls from Gregory. I didn't take his calls, so he sent text messages. I'm those messages. He asked where I went and also asked why I wasn't taking his calls. He told me to cool off and come to the house so we could speak, and also because he had cooled off and was ready to speak to me. I never replied to any of those messages because what I was really waiting for were the results, and as long as he was still in the same place I left him, I wanted to have nothing to do with him. At first, I left him because I thought leaving would change his mind, but I later realized that wasn't the case. After 2 months, I realized that there was no progress, so I decided not to go back. He stopped texting me after the first month, so I didn't need to explain anything. My shop is nowhere close to our house, so I didn't come in contact with him. The apartment I moved into was 1 hour away from Gregory's place, so we had no contact. He never showed up at my shop, and I never cared to look for him. After 6 months of separation, I got into a relationship with a guy one of my friends introduced to me. Divorce never crossed my mind because I knew it was a long process that I just wasn't interested in getting myself into. So moving on, I didn't think I needed to get divorced at that time. Since we were not in contact, we also felt like we were already divorced. I completely forgot about the divorce papers and he didn't react it. I didn't hesitate to cheat because I didn't see it as cheating as long as we weren't together anymore. I also imagined that he had someone that he was also with, so I didn't think that I was cheating or doing anything wrong. My affair partner and I didn't have any serious relationship and we broke up sometime after. I stayed single for a while before I got into another relationship. After 1 year, some of Gregory's friends came to my shop and started asking me a lot of questions. They kept asking me why I left the house just like that. It was obvious that they just came on their own because none of them mentioned anything about Gregory asking of me. I didn't ask about it too because I was not ready for that conversation. Gregory's friends and I had a cordial relationship, so it wasn't surprising that they came to ask me to go back to my husband. It was more of a warning rather than an advice, to be honest. They just told me that I must stop being childish and go back before it's too late. All their warnings fell on deaf ears because when I asked them if Gregory had a job yet, they said no. After they left, I made up my mind that my marriage was over, and I had nothing to do with Gregory any longer. I thought it would be a waste of time to wait for someone who had made up his mind not to look for a job to get a job. I wanted more in my life, and Gregory didn't seem to give me what I wanted, so I decided to stay away from him just for my own peace of mind. I resumed my relationship with my affiant partner who had some money and was also working. I didn't move in with him because I didn't want to be exclusive so soon. I had just gotten out of being tied to someone for 2 years, so I didn't want to rush back into the same situation almost immediately. My affair partner earned enough to take me out on the dates I craved, but to be honest, he wasn't exactly as financially stable as Gregory was when he was working. But I made do with what I had and focused on my business. I felt like it was important to be one self-made after all the drama my marriage had shown me. I wanted to expand my business by all means, so I tried to make that happen as fast as possible. But guys, this decision of mine ended up biting me. I'm back because I eventually realized that I made a huge mistake. It's been 2 years of being separated, right? But something crazy has happened right now that's making me rethink all the decisions I made. Can you guys believe that the husband I left with his business goals is now a big businessman? Yes, guy. I just got news 1 week ago that Gregory is now a very successful person. He pitched a business idea or whatever to a big company and launched something with them. I don't know a lot about how it happened, but I know that whatever he had been working on is now extremely successful. Yes, he's actually now a successful man. That means that all those days he stayed at the computer and looked at several piles paid off. He didn't lie about his dreams and his desire to have his own business foundation worked. The fact that he got a big payout and still had shares in a company is wild. I couldn't believe the news when I heard it, guy. It's actually true. Everything feels surreal, but most importantly, I feel like trash. I cannot believe that I left before he made it big. If I was still with him, I would have been the first to find out about this. But right now, I'm literally the last to know about this new advancement of his. And the fact that I was once the first person to know about what happens in his life and now I became the last is heart-wrenching. Do you actually know what's worse? It's the fact that he has a girlfriend now. Yes, Gregory had a girlfriend. I heard that he goes everywhere with her and she is living with him now. Can you believe that? He's still married to me, yet the moment he made it big, he got a girlfriend that had the audacity to live in our matrimonial home. What hurts more is that he never even bothered to tell me he now has money. He hasn't called me since 1 month after I left and he doesn't even care. I can't digest the fact that another woman is enjoying his wealth and success right now. We're still married, so I still have some right over him. I don't think it's completely unreasonable for me to wait for him to come back. Yes, guy, I want him back and I don't know how to go about it. I really need help and anything you do all day will be of help to me. You might ask why I didn't just try to talk to him, right? Well, I actually did try to talk to him, but none of that yielded any good thing. In fact, I ended up embarrassing myself as a result of that. Immediately I heard the news 1 week ago, I decided to go speak to him. I got dressed for the Navy Day and went to his house. Well, it's still my house since we're still married, I guess. Newsflash, he had hired a gatekeeper. We had to fire the last gatekeeper when Gregory listed his job because it was difficult to cope with finances. I thought seeing your ex-husband glow up after you left him only happened in movies until I saw the new car that was parked in Gregory's garage. Well, that cane was a big surprise to me. Even before I left the house, I knew it was one of Gregory's biggest possessions because he bought it while he was still working. He got the house even before we got married. I know that house costs a fortune, so it's something I'm proud of, and I want that house if we eventually get divorced just in case. So like I was saying, I got to the house and knocked on the door. Thankfully, I didn't have those encounters in soap operas where the girlfriend opens the door for the wife. Gregory was the one at home, and he was the one that opened the door after I knocked. He looked very different from the last time I saw him. I'd seen him once or twice since our separation whenever I came to the area, but it had been months since I saw him up close. He was growing a clean beard like all those businessmen. To be honest, Gregory didn't look like he was happy to see me at all. He looked like he hated the sight of me. I got everything but a cold welcome from him. I expected him to close the door immediately, but the first thing he said was, "Get the hell out of my face." Oh my God, I was actually very embarrassed, and I still get chills anytime I remember what happened. The fact that I was no longer welcomed in my own house did not sit well with me at all. I refused to go, and I tried to make him understand that I was there for a good reason, but all my efforts were in vain, and he refused to listen to me. He asked me to get out, or else he was going to make sure I embarrassed myself. I asked him if he had forgotten that we were married, and that statement almost landed a hot slap on my face. He almost slapped me, but he held his hand up and squeezed them together. He was on the ground and told me I was as good as dead to him. I told him I was still his wife, and then he told me the divorce papers will soon be sent to me and all he needed was my address. He said he had been waiting 2 years for me to come back so I could get the divorce papers. I couldn't even believe my ears. The fact that he wanted to divorce me after getting successful just screamed selfish. I told him I didn't want a divorce, and he confidently told me that only time would tell. He actually told me not to count my eggs before they hatch. I couldn't even believe that Gregory and I had grown so much apart that he spoke to me with so much bitterness and rudeness. It was beyond heartbreaking, to say the least. I started crying because I couldn't hold it in, but instead of consoling me, he closed the door in my face and locked it from the inside as if he was hiding from a petty thief at his doorstep. I left there with no self-esteem left. Since I came back from that place after getting embarrassed, it's been very hard for me to adapt to everything. I just keep thinking about how he embarrassed me and how obvious it was that he wanted absolutely nothing to do with me. It's not a matter of me being selfish or whatever. I just feel like as his wife, there's a level of respect that I actually deserve from him, but it's become quite clear that he's not ready to show me that respect anytime soon. I'm not okay with him planning to divorce me at all. Is Gregory insane or what? Why does he think he can just divorce me whenever he wants and I'll be okay with it? After wasting 3 years of my life, he thinks that he can just divorce me now that he has made it big. Please, guys, I really need your help because I just can't imagine why he would do this to me. I can't even sleep properly because I keep thinking about how bad the situation is. This man wants absolutely nothing to do with me. I cannot stomach that fact. He had a new car and a girlfriend, and he's living his life just like nothing happened or just like he had never had a wife before. Please help me with whatever advice I can get because it would really go a long way. Thank you all so much. Update. Oh wow, the amount of hats comments I have is wild. I had to double check if I was suddenly a celebrity overnight. I didn't even think that many people would pay attention to my life, but it seems like I thought wrong. Many of you even get the full story or what I've actually been through. I spent a lot of time trying to make you guys understand everything, but no one took time to get it. Instead of getting encouragement, I just got a lot of people that only cared to judge me the wrong way. Well, either way, life still went on and a lot has happened. I regret marrying the kind of husband I married. I regret it with every little finger in my heart because I cannot believe that Gregory was this cruel to me. I actually thought he would consider how I was with him when he was fired, but all that meant nothing to him. Gregory has ruined my life, and I regret marrying him with everything in me. He has divorced me, and he has left me with nothing. I know you might ask, how'd that even be possible? But trust me, it's more than possible, and he did it. Now you know I told you all of his embarrassing me when I went to the house, and how he told me he was going to divorce me, right? I called it nonsense and felt like he was just being dramatic. I mean, what did I get to do that he would want to divorce me when I was with him for all the 2 years he was broke? Right, it made no sense, so I refused to listen to him or take him seriously. That's until I got divorce papers delivered at my doorsteps barely 2 weeks after everything. I initially thought I was just seeing double and I was exaggerating, but guys, the divorce papers were real and they were for me. Of course, I just couldn't take the fall without a fight, no matter how little that fight is. That's why I went to go see him the next day, but I got another embarrassing shock. His girlfriend was at the house by the time I got there. If I just saw her there without any drama, it would have been bearable, but she was outside bringing big boxes in. Now I heard that she lived with him, but it wasn't something like a full move-in. That's why I had the hope that his relationship with her wasn't that serious yet. But no, she had been packing her things in. Yes, everything including her makeup and the biggest of boxes. Now we all know that if a girl brings all her makeup somewhere, she doesn't plan to leave. Now, I thought he had some respect left for her marriage, but I soon discovered that he actually had no respect for our marriage. Even though I dated other people, I never lived with them or let them move in with me. But he didn't do the same thing. He sent me divorce orders one minute, then he brought his girlfriend the next minute. Now that really got me very angry, and I won't even lie about it. Okay, keys say that part of everything is a little tolerable, and that's no reason to exaggerate. But I just couldn't get my mind off the fact that he actually let her move in fully. Do you know what that meant? He sent me divorce papers, and then his girlfriend moved in the very next day. That meant that he was serious about her and she was serious about him. It automatically meant that the both of them planned on staying together long term. Okay, bad news, but it was more of a horrible news because he wanted to move in a girl into the house I wanted as part of my alimony if the divorce happened. Yes, I had planned out what I wanted for my alimony if we got divorced, which we did. Now, how did I end up with nothing? Well, Gregory is a freaking fool, first of all, and I hope karma meets him and hits him harder than life. I don't mean to bring in that much negativity, but I just can't resist it. I'm just really angry about a lot of things, and writing this is making me relive everything all over again. Now, that's not the best situation for one to find themselves, so don't get shirty with me. So when I saw the girlfriend, who is the intruder in the story, I ignored her and tried to walk into the house. I guess she already knew who I was because she didn't even bother stopping me from getting in the house. I expected some sort of confrontation, but there was none at all, and that made me hate her immediately. It was obvious that she was trying to act like a jive girlfriend when she was literally just like anyone else. She hated me whether she showed it or not, and I knew it. The feeling was mutual anyway, so I didn't care to speak to her or confront her too. Instead, I diverted most of my attention to the so-called husband who is now my ex-husband. Can you believe that I found Gregory in our matrimonial room making space for his girlfriend? When I packed, I left some of the shoes I couldn't take with me, and even some of my personal items. I thought I would be back after 2 months initially, but when things didn't work out like that, I couldn't go back and take them, so I just decided to forget about them. Now that brings me to the part where I noticed that Gregory didn't even keep any of the stuff I left behind. I actually thought I would come back and still see those things, but I met one of them at all. Another shocking thing was the fact that he sent me out of the bedroom immediately when he noticed that I had come to the bedroom. He sent me out like I was just nobody who had no right to the bedroom. It felt weird because I once lived there, right? I felt I had some sort of right there, but there was none. Now, to make matters completely worse, his girlfriend finally came to the bedroom, ignored me, then sat on the bed and acted like she didn't notice my presence at all. Of course, it was a very difficult situation to behold, and I couldn't even believe it. Gregory also refused to even tell her to acknowledge my presence. Instead, he embarrassed me and sent me away like I was just a common tout. I got really angry and got straight to business. I told him I didn't like the fact that he sent me divorce orders just out of nowhere. I didn't like it at all, but he refused to listen. I asked him if he at least got the alimony ready, and he laughed in my face and told me I was leaving the marriage with nothing. I couldn't even believe my ears at that point, and I told him we would meet in court. The fact that he even had the audacity to say all those hurtful things to me in front of his girlfriend was what made me understand that the marriage was over, and he had no respect for me. So I decided to forget about the marriage and focus on getting the house. I knew the house was worth a lot of money, and so I thought it would be the best option for me to just get the house even if I was going to walk out of the marriage. I hired a lawyer and got everything ready because I was literally ready for war, and I wanted to fight as much as I could. But I got the shock of my life when I was later asked to be the one to pay Gregory's spousal support. That sounds weird, right? But trust me, that's exactly the situation I found myself in. I couldn't even believe it. Do you know that Gregory and his lawyer convinced the court that at the time of our separation, he was the spouse with no source of income, and I was the working spouse with income? He had his sack later and his finances to back this up. When my lawyer tried to argue that Gregory was already rich enough to actually give me spousal support, his bank statements showed that he still wasn't working and had no money. Gregory refused to collect his payout from the company just because he knew I would come for alimony. He hasn't been paid fully yet, so technically he's seen as unemployed. He doesn't work yet and is just a shareholder. He convinced the court that his girlfriend was the one finding his car and expenses. The both of them had planned everything out. He was so smart that he knew I would surely ask for something. He also sold the house and had documents to prove that he sold the house after I left him, so he could use the money to fund his business ideas that ended up not yielding results. He also has the papers I had sent and showed he signed them, but I never showed up. Yes, there was really evidence that he sold the house, but to who? His friend. The court has no business with that, but from the band on the document, I knew he sold the house to his friend. Of course, that was just his way of getting back at me. After the divorce, I know he'll get his ownership back. It was just a well-planned stunt. It finally made sense why his friends tried to warn me a year ago. They knew he was planning to leave me broke. Maybe he had started earning by then, so they wanted to warn me, but I didn't listen. My lawyer was able to help me out and prove I was struggling, so I just ended up giving him $2,000. Since I left him for 2 years, I was made to look bad, and there were medical reports of him being admitted to the hospital after I left, and I had to pay damages because he made it look like I stole from him and made him broke. Yes, Gregory did all these to me. I hate him with everything in me, and I know he'll regret it one day.